On today's show, we are highlighting Ivan Demidov's explosive NHL debut, as well as 5 standout rookie performances from the Chicago Blackhawks in the same game.
You are Locked On NHL Prospects, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
Hello, and welcome back to Locked On NHL Prospects, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. On this show, we break down everything prospects related for you 5 days a week, Monday through Friday. I'm your host, Sebastian High, the USHL scout over at Elite Prospects. And on today's show, we're not focusing on the draft, but rather we're looking into a very, very big game that happened here yesterday, where the Montreal Canadiens faced the Chicago Blackhawks, the Habs, in a late season playoff push, trying to finally clinch that spot, and hasn't quite locked it up just yet because Chicago did end up winning that game in a shootout. But Ivan Demidov got all the highlights in this game for the Habs. And in his first NHL game in his career, he scored an assist and a goal in the first, I believe, 14 minutes of his NHL career, in terms of it was in the first period, both of those. And he was just the most dynamic Montreal Canadian on puck the whole game. So we'll be breaking down his performance here in the first segment. And then in the second segment, Blackhawks fans can tune right back in because we'll be chatting about 5 different youngsters and rookies who played very, very good games for the Blackhawks. In the second segment, we're going to look at 3 forwards: Frank Nazar, Oliver Moore, and Ryan Greene. And then finally, in the last segment, we'll be highlighting the games of Sam Rinzel and Artyom Levshunov. So that's the outlook here for today's show. As always, make yourselves comfortable whenever or wherever you might be listening to this episode. And let's just dive straight into this. So, Habs fans, this is your segment, because Ivan Demidov is an NHLer. He is the Montreal Canadian, and he has shown the world just how good he is already at this level. It wasn't perfect, and we'll dive into the things that weren't perfect. There was one very, very clear instance that was far from perfect, but still, this was a tremendous on-puck performance. Demidov, I believe, had the puck on his stick for 1:06 in the offensive zone, second among all players in the game, just constantly holding onto the puck. It just seemed to gravitate towards him, and in every offensive sequence that he was in the O-zone, things were dangerous. He was constantly threatening to get the puck to a teammate in space, and he's just so dynamic with the puck on his stick. The skill, the puck handling, it all just blends wonderfully. And I also thought that his evasiveness, his ability to make defenders miss, was really quite surprisingly good for a first career NHL game. He seemed to just be very comfortable pretty quickly in terms of especially the offensive zone shifts. But on that first goal, the assist that he got on the Montreal Canadiens opening goal, a very classic Demidov kind of play. Habs fans are going to have to get used to these types of left board incursions, because Demidov loves to do those, in terms of picking up the puck midway into the offensive zone along the left wall and moving his way up and just constantly deceiving the defender, faking to go in the inside to cut inside, but in the end just bring the puck right around them, out of their reach, and through little quick crossovers and 10-2 maneuvers. Just, he's so smooth on his edges, and he's so escapable in tight. And we saw that happen on that goal. He made Chicago's defender look pretty bad, honestly, on that play, and then just set a perfect slot pass onto the tape of Alex Newhook right when he was about to go behind the net. So a very, very Ivan Demidov style of sequence, but seeing his game function on his third NHL shift ever, in terms of creating a goal precisely how he has been creating goals for the last years, that bodes very well here for the Montreal Canadiens. And it did not really take very long for him to add onto the score sheet with a tally. Really, really, really gorgeous goal in terms of the puck was deflected, went all the way down the ice, bounced off the end boards, came back into the slot, and Demidov was by far the first player attacking that puck. So it was just him versus Arvid Soderblom, and a gorgeous, gorgeous maneuver to curl the puck around the goaltender, the deception to make the goaltender bite on him, trying to just shoot the puck immediately, and then just dragging it around him and just putting it into the empty net. The handling skill is already quite clearly either the best or the second best on the Montreal Canadiens. I think that in that game, Demidov has already shown that he is truly, truly a cut above the rest, even at the NHL level in terms of those puck skills. He's tremendously talented, but it was not a perfect performance. And the thing that we have to highlight, unfortunately, for this part of the first segment is his back check on that 3-2 Chicago goal in the third period, because it was non-existent. And you saw the juxtaposition between a fellow rookie who has been acclimating and who, like Demidov, has always had a motor being a key part of his game, but it didn't always come into play at the right moments earlier on the season. Lane Hutson had his head down and was sprinting his way back, and he got back in time. If Demidov had the exact same kind of effort going back on the back check, he would have been able to disrupt the play, and it wouldn't have been a 2-on-1. It would have been far more easy to defend if Demidov had been able to get back. And he didn't even have to like work overly hard, I don't think, to get into position. Just a couple more strides, actually putting full strides and moving forward rather than just gliding back to the defensive zone. But that's a learning moment. And this is the kind of thing that I think Demidov is going to absorb relatively quickly at the NHL level. A low motor has never been really a component of Demidov's game. He's always been a pretty intense player who works hard. And these are the types of things where you got to direct them as a coaching staff. And I have no doubt the Montreal Canadiens will do that. And with time, you're going to see him back checking a whole lot harder on plays like that. And you already know when he went back to the bench there, like the camera panned to him and it was just head down. Like he was really disappointed in himself as well with that outcome. And the coaches most certainly would have addressed that play to him directly as well, if not during the game, then afterwards. This is going to improve over time. I'm not overly concerned with Demidov because he's always had this engagement, this intensity. He's never been a lazy off-puck player who doesn't want to play defense. That's not part of his game. And I saw some tweets going around that have already gotten like thousands of likes of like, look at Demidov, he can't back check. This is another like skilled European who just won't work defensively. No, I mean, like you can look at non-European rookies, same kind of issues. These are growing pains that every player is going to go through, including the hyper-skilled ones like Demidov. And as I mentioned, I'm not concerned about that motor really coming into play, even just this season in the playoffs. If he keeps doing back checks like this, he probably will get benched for a game or two. That message will be sent. That said, even with that one play in this game, and I didn't really see any other like uncharacteristic non-back checks from Demidov in this game, because again, it's relatively uncharacteristic for this player. The rest of it was brilliant. The on-puck control, the dynamism, the ability to deceive defenders, the lateral mobility, being able to make people miss, and just handling in a phone booth. He is a truly special talent, and he showed it all in this game. I was at the Montreal Forum Sports Bar in the old historic Montreal Forum, and maybe like a dozen or 2 dozen Habs fans watching the game there in a pretty big place. So it wasn't like filled or anything, but every single goal that was scored in that game, there was a massive roar in the bar. But the main thing that I noticed, the electricity in the place every single time Demidov touched the puck. You got that sense from the broadcast of the in-arena feel, but it was the exact same kind of deal. Even just watching it in the sports bar of Montreal Canadiens fans watching this player in their colors for the first time, a real sense of excitement. And just every single time he's had the puck in the offensive zone, some people were getting out of their seats, others were on the edge of it. It was just this really palatable energy that, apart from like a player like Lane Hutson, I haven't really seen since like PK Subban's like especially like playoff performances a decade or so ago, in terms of just the electricity that comes with it. And it was just passing through everyone watching that game, whether they were at home or in a sports bar or in the arena. So it was something very special to watch, because Habs have not seen a forward with this type of skill set, with this type of handling ability, with this type of deception and dynamism this millennium. I don't feel uncomfortable saying that. I've been watching this team for well over half of that span, and there certainly hasn't been a player like Demidov in that stretch. And even going back to the Kovalev days, very different situation. Having a Kovalev in the twilight of his career, having a couple final fantastic campaigns with the Montreal Canadiens, It's a very different thing to getting a player like Ivan Demidov, who's a 19-year-old that you just drafted, and on game one, he's already showing you the type of skill that Kovalev was showing at his peak. So very, very fun stuff here for Montreal Canadiens fans. And Demidov, I thought, had a fantastic debut performance, even though there are things to learn, and that's going to be the story of adapting to the NHL hockey level, especially at this time of year, heading into potentially the playoffs if the Habs are able to secure that. There is a very, very little room for error. And apart from that one back check, and yes, certainly it had its consequences, this was not a game with many mistakes for Demidov. And I thought that St. Louis really broached that nicely in his post-game press conference, basically just saying, well, if there was one player tonight who was engaged, who was on it mentally, who wasn't worried, wasn't stressed, it was Demidov. And to do that in his first career game while being just catapulted into a team in a playoff race, and not just any team, but the Montreal Canadiens on their first playoff potential berth since their cup run in 2021, the pressure is at an all-time high. He's already being treated like a celebrity. To come out onto the stage and do that in his first game, very, very impressive stuff. But we'll see how he continues here in the next game against the Carolina Hurricanes to wrap up the regular season, which I will be attending. So I'm extremely excited to catch a Demidov viewing live. I've been watching this player for years, and getting to watch him in person is going to be a true joy. But I'd love to hear from Habs fans down in the comments. If you're able to secure the spot in the playoffs, what are your expectations for Demidov? Where is he going to be playing in the lineup? How many minutes a night is he going to be averaging? And just how big of a role is he going to be playing in just that consistent offensive generation for this team? But that wraps it up here for the first segment. In the next one, we'll pivot over to the Chicago Blackhawks, talking about Frank Nazar, Oliver Moore, and Ryan Greene. But first, a quick message from our sponsors here at Locked On NHL Prospects. Scaling your business requires the right expertise at the right time. With Upwork, you can find specialized freelancers in marketing, development, design, and more. Experts ready to help you take your business to the next level. Upwork gives businesses flexibility by connecting them with top freelance talent across multiple industries, including AI, IT, web development, and marketing. Whether you need extra hands for a project or a long-term partner, Upwork makes hiring simple and affordable. If you need help with a marketing campaign, Upwork can connect you with a freelance expert who delivers exceptional results. Posting a job is free and simple, and within a day with multiple qualified candidates to choose from. Visit Upwork.com right now and post your job for free. That's Upwork.com to connect with top talent and grow your business today. All right, let's keep this episode rolling in the second segment here. And we're just going to keep talking about some of my favorite players. I'm very much enjoying this episode because we're highlighting a lot of players that I've really, really, really liked in their respective draft years that have, in their own ways, become favorites of mine in those classes. And another standout in that category is Frank Nazar III of the Chicago Blackhawks, who had a fantastic game. He was probably the best rookie on the ice in this game, and that's including Lane Hutson, and I'd even throw Connor Bedard in there, even though he's not a rookie anymore. Nazar was fantastic in this game, bringing just constant speed, constantly just beckoning to have the puck on his stick, and he was creating through it. And on the broadcast, even the RDS commentators, Pierre Houd and Marc Denis, who are my two favorite commentators in all of sports, by the way, constantly mentioning Frank Nazar to the point that in like the late second, early third period, they're saying like, we've been mentioning this guy all the time. What a fantastic performance, because it was like a broken record of like every single time, like Nazar with a dynamic entry, Nazar doing this, Nazar doing that. And he was really, really that involved. And a player that is just playing the same style that I fell in love with in his draft year. He's only expanded his game. He hasn't like changed the way he plays. And I've loved that because this has always been a very intense, intelligent two-way player who works incredibly hard in both directions and offers a lot of offensive threat off the rush, both as a shooter and a passer. The puck skills, I think, are really, really good, and he never should have slipped to 13th overall, in my opinion, back in 2022. He was a player that I had ranked second overall, ahead of Lane Hutson, ahead of Yuri Slavkovsky, ahead of all the other guys, apart from Shane Wright. Nazar was my number two, and he pretty much stuck in that spot all season. I loved that player in his draft year, and he's really, really showing why I fell in love with him in with the NTDP. And he had a goal and an assist in this game against the Habs, including also the shootout winner on top of that. Just bringing so much to the ice in terms of pace, in terms of intensity, and combining all of that with a really good brain, to not just in terms of offensive creation and creativity, but also in terms of just at pace, making a simple play at the right time when he needs to. When pressure is coming, he can just default to making the simple play rather than trying to do too much. And he's really found a better, I guess, control of that toggle since his draft year. In his draft year, one of the bigger, I guess, concerns in his development was often just tries to do a little bit too much with the puck on his stick, and delegating to teammates and finding a bit more of a balance there is something important. And in this game, he showed all of that. He was fantastic. He's a player that I think is going to be a key component of the Chicago Blackhawks for over a decade to come. And especially when combined with the skill sets of players like Connor Bedard and the other prospects coming through for the Blackhawks in the coming seasons at forward, I think there's a lot to look forward to in terms of how you're going to surround this player. But I'd be especially curious to kind of see what they're going to be doing on draft day to better surround their skilled, undersized players. And mind you, Nazar is quite a physical guy. He's constantly working, feet never stop moving. But still, I think that having one larger player on the ice with him wouldn't hurt, especially if you want to combine him and Bedard on a line long term, because I think those two, in terms of chemistry, in terms of complementary toolkits, in terms of both being dual threats who play with at pace and with high skill and high creativity, they're a wonderful fit to play together. But I think they'd have to be insulated a little bit more with a bigger body. And one of those players could be Porter Martone for the Blackhawks. I think he'd be a really interesting fit on draft day, but we'll see where he ends up, because on the most recent Central Scouting Board, he was the 6th ranked North American skater behind players like Jake O'Brien, for instance. So we'll see where Martone ends up falling, but I think he'd be a very interesting fit with this lineup. But moving on to another very speedy, slightly undersized forward, William Moore. No, Oliver Moore of the Chicago Blackhawks, who was the 19th overall pick in 2023. Another player I loved in his draft year. He was a top 5 talent or top 6 talent for me all season long. And it's just always been pace with this player. He's just constantly working his way up ice. He's so quick. Incredible in terms of the mechanics, a very gifted skater in all 4 directions. And he's very comfortable also executing like high-end passes at his highest speeds, and combining that pace and playmaking, I think, can make him very dangerous long term, especially when you add in the component of high-end defensive work rate and pretty good defensive habits and intelligence. There's a lot to build off of as a foundation here with Oliver Moore. And this was the first NHL game I caught of this player. It was his 8th game in his career since making his debut back on the 30th of March against Utah, since signing his ELC. But he was, I thought, really quite impactful as well. Not nearly so much as Frank Nazar. He's still getting acclimated, whereas Nazar, I think, is finding his stride. But he was quite involved as well. I mean, he got absolutely annihilated by Caden Gooley on a hit, but it was a premature hit and therefore got called for interference. And the Blackhawks were able to get the 2-1 goal to climb back a little bit into the game on that power play. And he did also, I believe, make Samuel Montembeault trip with an errant stick in the 3rd period. But still, I thought that with the puck on his stick, he was a guy that was pushing the pace. He was using his speed very well, and he was working back defensively too. And that's the kind of play that you want to see from Oliver Moore. And I think that in terms of adapting to the NHL, it's perfectly fine for him to be starting off in the bottom 6. He has the defensive habits. He has the intelligence, I think, to play that role quite well. He's still kind of growing into his NHL frame, but he's definitely added some weight since being drafted. He's up to 5'11" and 194, but eventually you're going to see him cross that 200-pound mark and just get a bit more sturdy on his feet as well, to resist contact, to play within contact. These are the things he's going to be having to work on in the coming seasons. But I still really love the top 6 potential with this player, especially as like a second line center or a second line winger who can insulate you a little bit defensively while bringing a ton of pace and speed and creativity off the rush. And the cycle play, I still think, needs some more work, but I mean, with players like Connor Bedard and Frank Nazar to practice with and grow alongside, I think the cycle game will take some significant steps in the coming seasons. But to wrap things up here for the second segment, I will also want to highlight a player who made his debut alongside of Ivan Demidov, but got a couple less headlines for his work. And that is Ryan Greene, who signed from Boston University. He captained the team this season, scoring 38 points in 40 games. And he is a very, very reliable kind of player. He has a decent amount of both hard and soft skill, good boards to middle play, constantly being able to win battle along the boards and get the puck to the middle of the ice, quick little passes. He plays with pace and intensity. He's defensively responsible, very hardworking, quite physically inclined guy that likes to play within that contact. And I mean, I think he's a really, really good player to be an understudy for a player like Joe Veleno, for instance. I think a lot of what Veleno has become very good at in the NHL is kind of what Greene also projects as. So being able to learn underneath Veleno, I think, is really nice here for the Blackhawks, and another bonus for having acquired Veleno at the deadline from the Detroit Red Wings. But I thought that he was very solid in this game. He didn't pop off the page. He didn't see his name get called out constantly for doing big things on the puck, but he was connecting play quite effectively. He was engaged in board battles. He was involved physically. I think that's another player who just has some really solid bottom six potential for the Chicago Blackhawks. And with the amount of skill that's already in the team, you don't need this player to be one of your top six scorers longer term. But I think he's a fantastic fit there in the bottom of the lineup to bring energy and physicality and overall just two-way impact. He's just a very, very solid player, and also a St. John's, Newfoundland native, where I'm also born. So that's another bonus here from my personal end. But that wraps things up for the second segment. Here in the final one, we'll stick with the Blackhawks and discuss Sam Rinzel and Artyom Levshunov's game against the Montreal Canadiens. But first, a quick message from our sponsors here at Locked On NHL Prospects. Looking for a snack that's both delicious and nutritious? Crack into a good source of protein with Wonderful Pistachios. Wonderful Pistachios is one of the highest protein nuts. Each 1 ounce serving has 6 grams of protein, giving you over 10% of your daily value. Plus, they're packed with fiber and better for you unsaturated fats to help keeping you feel fueled for longer. Personally, I love the no shells variety. It's the perfect grab and go snack for my busy days. Whether I'm snacking at my desk, on my road trip, on a road trip, or just need a quick protein boost, Wonderful Pistachios is my go-to. And if you love cracking open every single shell for that satisfying crunch, the in-shell variety are a classic favorite. Get snacking and get cracking with the snack that packs a protein punch. Visit wonderfulpistachios.com to learn more. All right, let's wrap up the show here in the final segment with the last two players of the show, and almost leaving the best for last in terms of the player who impressed me the most in this game. I think it was Sam Rinzel among all these rookies. I have been intimately aware of just how dynamic Ivan Demidov is. And even though his debut was even better than I expected it to be, I was already expecting it to be really, really good. Sam Rinzel is a player that I had a lot of doubts about in his draft year. He was mainly playing high school hockey. He was very raw, still had a lot of just ironing out of very, very like immature habits to do in his game. But the tools were always really good, but it seemed a bit too theoretical for me as a projection to really be high on at the draft. But he did also play in the USHL with Waterloo that season, and that was not the right system for him. Waterloo's a very compact kind of forechecking system, and Sam Rinzel is a kind of activator, a dynamic offensive defenseman. At least he was more so at that point in his development. But since then, with 2 full seasons at the University of Minnesota, he's really expanded his game. He's become a lot more comfortable defensively. He's been able to leverage his mobility so well on the defensive end as well, in terms of taking space and time away from opponents, being aggressive while defending the rush. And he's just 20 years old. He's turning 21 in June. Very young player, and at 6'4", 190 pounds, as a right shot defenseman. There's a lot to like here with the profile, and he already has 4 points in 8 NHL games here this season. And he also picked up an assist in that game against the Habs. But more than anything, the thing I wanted to highlight is that ever since signing for the Chicago Blackhawks, Rinzel has not played less than 20 minutes in a single game. And against the Habs, he set a new career high, playing 26 minutes and 52 seconds. That game included overtime, sure, but he didn't play the entirety of it, and he was, I mean, Chicago's most used defender. He's completely stepped up into that Seth Jones hole on the right side of defense, and he's been doing a really, really good job offensively. Just a very comfortable player on puck. The deception, being able to like go for lookoffs on the puck, and making Montreal Canadian like penalty killers also bite on one pass going the other way, deceiving them using pretty solid puck handling ability as well to influence the play. But more than anything, the thing that impressed me the most was the intelligence and composure on both sides of the puck. With the puck, even when under pressure, he was making simple plays, putting the puck into a spot that only he could get to. Very pragmatic, very methodical kind of game for him with the puck on a stick. And defensively, I thought it was the same kind of deal. He was a difficult kind of player to get around for even Montreal's most dynamic attackers, including Ivan Demidov, who was attacking down that flank on the right side for the Chicago Blackhawks, where Sam Rinzel was very much responsible for defending that area. And I thought he did a very, very good job. He wasn't necessarily taking Demidov out of the play physically or anything, but just consistently getting his body between player and puck and playing the game the right way in a much more simple way than I remember him playing in his draft year campaign in the USHL. He was trying to overcomplicate everything, trying to do too much. That has entirely been like whittled down now to a much more cohesive style of play, and he was just so effective. So I was very impressed with Sam Rinzel, and I kind of knew I would be going into it a little bit because I had a couple people telling me that he's been fantastic since signing his entry-level deal, including Anthony Donati, who I did an entire breakdown episode with on the Chicago Blackhawks just a couple weeks ago, which I can link below in the description. And he was telling me that Rinzel's amazing. He's like easily top 4 defenseman long term, and he already is. And I was like, okay, that's a pretty bold stance. And then I watched him play. I was like, yeah, that looks pretty much right. I mean, Rinzel was fantastic in this game. A player who had a few more growing pains on the right side of defense for the Chicago Blackhawks, however, was Artyom Levshunov, a player I really, really believe should have stayed in college this season. And even though, look, he got really quite good in the AHL by the end of his stint before getting called up, I still think that a bit more of an incremental approach with his development was the way to go this season, because I still think there's quite a few raw elements in his game, and I don't know if the NHL is the right place to be developing at this point. And still, I thought he was quite decent in this game. I thought his gap control against the rush was a lot more, I guess, consistent than I'd seen even earlier on this year, both at the NHL and AHL levels. And on top of that, I thought that with the puck on his stick, he was doing a lot more simple things well, rather than trying to overcomplicate things. A bit like Sam Rinzel in his draft year. I think Levshunov has a tendency for that at times as well with the puck, but he took a penalty late in the second period, which gave an opening for the Montreal Canadiens to really create something dangerous and to shift the tide of the game back. But I also thought that he was maybe like chasing hits a little bit too much. I saw him try to land hits on Ivan Demidov at least 3 or 4 times and only making like quarter or half contacts, but still repeatedly going for it, even though Demidov is so slippery, where the more pragmatic, the more like mature, I guess, approach to defending a player like Demidov is containment, trying to contain him rather than just finish him and kill him. But he was going more for the hits, and Demidov was slipping out of them and doing quite well in his evasiveness, because that really is like the biggest component of Demidov's skating in terms of what he does at a very high level. And Levshunov just looked a little bit more raw by comparison. But still, I think that this is a player who's gotten a lot more criticism for his play this season than he's earned. I've talked about this quite a lot on the podcast in terms of the difficulty of adapting to 4 new levels of hockey in a 3-year time span, jumping from Belarusian U18 hockey to the Green Bay Gamblers in the USHL in 2022-23, then proceeding to Michigan State University last season, then to the Rockford IceHogs to start this season, and now jumping up to the NHL. Those are 4 massive leaps in quality of competition to take in a 4-year time span, let alone a 3-year time span. So a player to be doing this at the age of 19, there's a lot to like here still with Levshunov. The skating, the aggression, the overall, I think, two-way upside is very high, but I think he's going to need another 3 or 4 or 5 seasons to really hit the upper echelons of that potential. And perhaps a more patient approach with this player would have been decent. But hey, I'm not in the Chicago Blackhawks organization. I am not in control of his development. So we'll see how things keep progressing here for Levshunov next season. I'd love to see. I'm very curious to see where he ends up playing the majority of his games next campaign, because it likely will be in the NHL. But again, he's going to have to keep adapting to be more comfortable here at the NHL level. But we still have been seeing the high end flashes from this player. Even in this like first or second shift, he almost had a primary assist when he was activating up into the offensive zone. And overall, I thought that his activation habits were a lot more like selective and well timed in this game. So he has this progression, but I still think, as I mentioned, having the opportunity to just dominate a level of play again for a season would have helped him quite a bit this campaign, and also would have avoided some of the Demidov and Levshunov comparisons, which I know were very much floating around on social media there yesterday during this game. But that wraps up the show here for us today. I'd love to hear from you in the comments down below here on YouTube. What are your thoughts on any of the prospects I mentioned here today? Which of these rookies impressed you the most if you were able to watch this game? And overall, what is the potential, the overall upside for Ivan Demidov? Because it is stratospheric. I would love to hear about your thoughts down below. And if you're listening on your favorite podcasting platform, please do make sure to make us your first listen of the day. For your second listen of the day, you can head on over to Locked On Fantasy Hockey, where Flip and Steel break down everything you could possibly want to know to build yourself a sustainable and competitive fantasy roster. But that wraps it up here for us today. Thanks so much for tuning in. As always, I'm your host, Sebastian High, and I look forward to catching you listening again very, very soon.